future, shattered dreams, end of times ain't what it seems.
Hello, friends. It's Sam Cheney reporting for Weaponized News. Today is December 5th, 2025. Got some 2026. Always screw up on the first writing it, right? When you write it out, I always did in school. Screw up for about a month on whatever year it is. 2026. Welcome to Weaponized News. If you're not pro-U.S. hegemony and imperialism, you're a damn narco-trafficking, pro-fentanyl, Trendeagra criminal. And so that's the stance of where we're at here now. Amazing. We have Simon on the line for a special Monday 2-hour at 2 p.m. 5 Eastern broadcast. We got a lot of news to get to. So let me just give you the hooks here. Maduro's, him and his wife pled innocent today in New York. We're going to cover all that. The fallout. Who's next? Who's next? Is it going to be Greenland, Canada, Cuba, Colombia? We just don't know. We just don't know who's going to be next. And if you're against any of this, you're damn criminal. Because we love the empire here. Now, That's what all your clown-fluencers, quote, conservatives, clown-servatives over there on the interwebs, they all love it. So standing by their principles and their man, Mr. Pro-Peace, President Trump. We got all that to go over. The fallout at the UN Security Council today. China, Russia reply to all of this. We got Mexico reply. We got who's actually running Venezuela now. What does all that look like? There was an attack on JD Vance. And I keep telling you guys, don't attack them. Don't do violence. The state has a monopoly on violence. Some kid allegedly went to JD Vance's house in Cincinnati, Ohio, and broke out the windows of his house. We have that report. Don't do violence against these people. They're going to throw the book at you and maybe just whack you as we continue to report here. But they're triggering. Who knows if it was organic or whatever, a patsy. Does it even matter anymore at this point? We've got Walz dropping out of the Minnesota governor's race on the back of all these fraud allegations. We got that to cover. We got public health news. We have meme of the day from Department of Homeland Security. We have China and Republic of South Korea had a big summit. We'll go over a little bit of that. And of course, aardvark genocide continues as per usual. Heavy bombings in southern Lebanon reported today. But hey, we have a ceasefire, so if you're against that, you're a damn terrorist. Where are we at here? This day in history. And then we'll bring on Simon. Let me blast through it quickly here. On this day of January 5th, going back to the year 1709, we saw the Great Frost begin during the night. A sudden cold snap that remains Europe's coldest winter ever saw thousands reportedly killed due to exposure and the cold. And it also caused crops to fail in France. So thousands of deaths across Europe due to the Great Frost of 1709. 1781 on this day, we saw the British burn Richmond, Virginia. British naval expedition led by Benedict Arnold burns Richmond, Virginia on this day, 1781. 1848 on this day, U.S. House of Representatives votes to stop sharing the Oregon Territory with the United Kingdom. 1886 on this day, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was published by Robert Louis Stevenson. In 1914, on this day, industrialist Henry Ford announces his $5 minimum per day wage, doubling most workers' pay from $2.40 for a 9-hour day to $5 for an 8-hour day. In 1949, on this day, then U.S. President Harry Truman labels his administration, quote, the fair deal. In 1959, on this day, Bozo the Clown live children's show premieres on television. Now we just say it's Congress. In 1968, on this day, Dr. Benjamin Spock was indicted for conspiring to violate draft law in America here. And they should, you would think they would learn. I didn't even know this till reading my This Day in History. In 1996, Hamas operative Yaha Ayayash is killed by an aardvark planted booby trap cell phone. That's 1996. Remember the whole pagers and all the other communications devices that got blown up by aardvarks there against the terrorists. And so you would think they would have learned and remembered, but apparently not, because they pulled that trick way back in 1996. And then today in New York City, they love their commies there in New York City, apparently here now. So today, 2025 in New York City, New York becomes the first U.S. city to introduce a congestion charge of $9 for Manhattan Central Business District. And of course, it's all for your health and the environment. And with that, let's bring on, oh, here's Simon's segue, the Pixies, and then we're going to bring them on and get to all this news for you. I mean, how are you doing this Monday?
I'm doing very, very well.
Man.
Today, not just but since we last spoke in 2025, a whole year ago, it seems. And I had a big stint on George Galloway yesterday, which you very but our end of year special has now got over 6,000 views, and it would be very, very nice indeed if we could get our audience.
You're breaking up there.
Wouldn't you?
There you go. It's crazy how we have a great connection and then we go live and the connection's not so great. Here is, I posted it in the, what you're talking about here in the chat. Yeah, please share that out. Geopolitical clash, U.S. versus China, foreign policy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Please reshare that. All right, you back with us there, Simon?
Yes, unfortunately, we have an audio problem at the moment. Yep. So I'm hearing audio, and it looks like you're hearing me.
Yeah, audio is no good. It's no good. Okay, so after Maduro, who's next? The AP.
How are we going there now, Sam? Can you hear me clearly?
That's good.
Can you nod if you can hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Yep. It's good. So who's next here? Who's next? Trump spurs speculation about his plans for Greenland, Cuba, and Colombia. Who is going to be next on the hit list here now? Let's take a look. Well, Greenland has already replied with Trump multiple times, saying that we're going to take Greenland next.
Sam, I hope you can hear me better now. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear you at all. I see you nodding.
I hear you.
Can you speak for a moment?
Yeah, I hear you. Got it.
No, still have no audio from you. Well, I was just saying to the audience that if they haven't already done so, it would be enormously helpful to us if they kindly retweet the 80-minute special you put out a few days ago.
Yeah, I posted it in the chat. Okay. Well, Greenland has replied. Their prime minister here, Jens Frederick Nielsen, said, "We are not at a point where we are thinking that a takeover of our country might happen overnight. We're trying to establish a direct line with Washington." Craziness. This guy right here. Are you back?
Sam.
Yeah. Are you back?
No audio from you.
Jeez. Hard. This is a frustrating broadcast. We had all our music and everything together here, but for some reason,
unfortunately, I still have no audio from you.
Just roll with it then. Roll with it. Colombian president, they're looking hard at him. Trump's threatening him all over the place. Colombian President Petro said, although I have not been a career military man, I know war and clandestiny. I swore never to touch a weapon after the 1989 peace pact, but for the fatherland, I will take up arms again, though I do not wish to. We'll see. How's that now, Simon?
Hello there once again. Still apparently no audio at all.
Let's hear now from Howard Lutnick as we try to sort out Simon's connection here. Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, Epstein's
Sorry
neighbor,
to the audience for this.
and always looking over Trump's shoulder here. Lutnick said Venezuela was once a great, rich, and dynamic country, abundant natural resources, starting with enormous reserves of oil and natural gases. Let's hear from old Howard Lutnick and Lindsey Graham right there as well, rubbing his hands together, loving all of this regime change.
Outside of the oil business. Well, the oil business, yes, but outside, yes. Howard, you want to?
You have steel, you have minerals, right? All the critical minerals. They have a great mining history that's gone rusty. So steel, aluminum, minerals, I mean, this is all, it's a rich. It was once upon a time one of the great economies and cultures of the world, and it was destroyed, and now President Trump is going to fix it and bring it back for the Venezuela.
But it's not easy. It's really gone bad. But it's got potential. What?
Any rare earth minerals?
They have rare earth, but everybody has rare earth. Rare earth is not rare. What's rare is the processing. We're doing processing plants all over. There's no such thing as rare earth. The rare earth is everywhere. What isn't everywhere is the processing of rare earth. And
how's that connection for you, Simon? Still not good. Here's Graham at that same press gaggle on Trump Force One saying that Cuba, they're looking hard at Cuba, says their days are numbered. So looks like Cuba is next on the hit list, along with everybody else that we just named.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day. And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
Lindsey Graham loves it. Simon, are you there? Yeah. Audio is just horrible. Here is, and maybe it's going to be Iran. Here's Lindsey Graham and Trump with a make
The powers
Iran.
that be definitely don't want me talking tonight.
Make Iran great again hat. Maybe we should start buying these up, MAGA. Make Iran great again. There. So Maduro was arraigned today in New York court, him and his wife, Cecilia Flores, and Nicolas Maduro. Here's one of their images of these captured alleged narco drug trafficking terrorists. There's a bunch of funky images too. I don't know if you guys noticed where he was changing clothes. Who knows if any of these images are even real? But here is his perp walk into New York City court earlier today.
There is being walked.
So it looks like they may have landed that helicopter on the soccer field. Now, there is that helipad on the West Side Highway side that they use the 32nd Street.
There's some also originally downtown.
So it looks like now they decided to use the soccer field as a landing pad for those helicopters. This is a huge security operation as well because, as you know, he's a part of those narco terrorists, TDA, and as well. And so they're on high security alert because they have their own resources, their own drones as well.
So they have, you got to read the 25-page indictment. They have an airtight case on this guy. I'm not saying there's not going to be moments that things are going to be tossed out and they might be lengthy, and it's going to be costly. But they got him dead to rights through 3 administrations. And you know, that's why the bounty was on his head. And most people could, prior to President Trump grabbing him, everyone was agreement he had to go.
This is unbelievable. This is in Brooklyn, New York.
So as per usual, the War Channel, Fox News, loves it. Maduro and his wife plead innocent, not guilty at first court appearance since capture in Venezuela earlier today in New York. As we're trying to reconnect with Simon. Apologies for the bad connection. We connected before the show and everything was fine. And then we go live and we have these problems, coincidentally enough. Here are artist renderings of Maduro in court today from the Associated Press. And don't you like how they drew him throwing up the old Illuminati gang sign right there? I don't know what that's all about, but they chose to draw him that way. Per the Associated Press, artist renderings of Maduro in court. His judge is a 92-year-old judge who let he's an aardvark, of course, and he let old Michael Cohen out early. Of course, Trump's corrupt lawyer. Let's try one more time with Simon here. How's that, Simon? Any better? No? Now we have no action from Simon. So upon his not guilty or innocent plea today, Maduro the judge ordered him to appear in court on March 17th for a hearing. So he's going to sit there in jail in New York till March 17th. So due process and all that being honored, right? Not really. Speedy trial, not so much. Nicolas Maduro's hired Barry Pollock, the longtime lawyer for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, to defend him, according to Bloomberg. Let's try one more time. Apologies again. I understand it's painful to try to when we have bad connection. How's that, Simon? No better? It may not work for us today. So that a big UN Security Council meeting today, as we're almost at the half-hour mark. Walls was there. Yeah, no audio even from you now, Simon.
Sam.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. I can't see you at all. I just switched from a British eSIM that I'm using whilst I'm in Europe back to a Florida SIM. And it is interesting that we tested the connection beforehand today. I got a lot of responses on my appearance on Galloway. I had been making some rather cheeky comments to the new British Cyber and Specialist Operations Command last week. And they definitely appear to have taken an interest because you and I We're most diligent to test our connection earlier in the show to make sure that everything was A-OK for an uninterrupted broadcast. And the second we go live, I have total comms interruption with you, and I still can't see your face, but I'm very happy to be able to hear your voice. So thank you for struggling through on the broadcast. This is something that I have suffered, obviously, previously on this show, but on other shows as well. So it is interesting. I've recently been designated as an account with inauthentic behavior for the 5th time in order to reduce my reach. Which is what they specifically say in the notification to me. And it is entertaining that now that I've done about 250 media appearances, both in Canada, England, Australia, and obviously based out of Florida, that I have a total followership of 2,750 or thereabouts on X. So talk about being suppressed. Even some of the folks at InfoWars have managed to quadruple their followerships in the recent period. But I, along with Candice Morris and Mercurius, are under massive, massive account growth suppression. But you think that I had like 10 minutes on Galloway, broke a lot of interesting stuff. We had that story that you put out, the special of that's 80 minutes long. That's got about 6,500 views at the moment. But I find it very interesting that Glenn Deason does a show early on a Monday morning, very early, with Jeffrey Sachs, gets 1 million views. We break that massive Chinese foreign policy news and it gets 6,500 views, even after being retweeted by the mother of all talk shows, which is the George Galloway show, and by the folks at InfoWars. Harrison Smith kindly reposted that. It jumped at 1,000 or so early this morning. So if any of our audience haven't yet retweeted it, which I know that at least 100 of you haven't, because it's so far only got about 25 retweets, please do find it in Sam's feed or in my feed, Simon from Florida too. I've retweeted it about 20 times over the last 2 days. Just goes to show that even 20 retweets can have a huge effect, and it should have had 125 by now. And if you haven't yet watched it, then now is definitely the time to do so. But people will notice that we played the Imperial March from Star Wars, and that, in the opinion of the composer, who in that case was the conductor John Williams, was the finest recording of it via Deutsche Grammophon, who recorded a lot of pieces from Herbert von Karajan after his Nazi affiliation period had been rehabilitated. And there's an interesting backstory to that. So if you haven't already done so, Sam, would you mind playing that like 90-minute clip from John Williams explaining how that concert appearance came about?
We played 2 rehearsals with the orchestra, at the end of which the orchestra management came and said, "Can we play the Imperial March from Star Wars?" And I hadn't programmed that. I thought I had already asked the brass to play quite enough of big music. And as I understand it, the brass players in the orchestra themselves requested that we would play the Imperial March. So at the end of the rehearsal, we played it. They had the music. Everyone seemed to know it. And I have to tell you, it was honestly the best presentation of that march that I ever heard. It had such solidity and such power and force, but also control in the tone and the intonation of everything. It is powerful and forceful, but not forced into some airspace that it shouldn't be. A kind of strength that defines the word. That was certainly my favorite piece that they played. They played it as though they owned it, and I felt very grateful to them for asking me to, or giving me the chance to play it at the end of the program. I loved it.
So, Sam, thank you for playing that. And for my long-suffering followers who are probably getting all kinds of knock-on consequences by being associated with my Twitter feed, the answer to which would be just to not follow me. I'm not doing a follow account. I really am not worried about that. But if you do want to get the bad news daily as opposed to weekly from Geoengineering Watch, then you can simply log in twice a day and go to the replies section where you'll see the truly dastardly deeds of the Imperial stormtroopers on a hourly basis. But in this case,
Simon,
notice what
I noticed your censorship and also BBC journalists have been banned. It's being reported from describing the kidnapped Venezuela leader as being kidnapped. So
even though President Trump said that he thought that was the best word to use, right? So they're literally censoring even more than the American president wants the globe to be censored. But if you just listen, and people can go back, and just in case they don't believe me, to what John Williams, who was the composer of that piece of music, said. He said that it wasn't forced into the airspace, right? And he said that the band played it like they owned it. So that's pretty much like Trump in Venezuela. Okay. Now, the other reason for me choosing that is it was very much an elitist appearance there at the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, okay, in 2020. Okay. And the orchestra actually memorized the piece and they requested to play it at the last moment. And he felt that it was the best rendition of it from 1978 until that point, which I think was like August 2020. Okay, so over a very, very long period of time. The audience, very unusually, burst into applause at the beginning of it. Opera and symphony attendees don't normally clap while music is being played. And then they cheered and gave a standing ovation at the end. And how emblematic is that of the European elite, many of whom were probably in the audience on that occasion, being recorded by an organization that had lots of Nazi affiliations, right? Who actually wanted the empire to step on them in the imperial march and then celebrate it afterwards. And if we don't see that with all the European representatives at the United Nations Security Council today, and at all of their public pronouncements, most glaring of which has been the British cabinet members on mainstream media today, where they were unable or prohibited from saying that international law had been violated by the American intervention into Venezuela, in a shameful contradiction of all of their positions regarding Ukraine. It just goes to show how the vassal states are absolutely prostrating themselves before the big daddy, as Mark Ritter called President Trump. It is truly and utterly humiliating for them, even though President Trump, on his press briefing, while we had this rather bizarre scene with the Commerce Secretary and the US Senator from the state of South Carolina emerging from the toilet cubicle together. All right. He's talking about imposing further tariffs on India, which was not widely reported by the mainstream media. That bit was cut out. And he also threatened Colombia and Cuba and restated the need for annexing Greenland.
I
And it
mean,
should be,
and they threatened Iran. They threw in some
yeah,
threats against Iran as well.
it's absolutely incredible. And we've had members of the British military, retired and current, saying, oh, this is being overstated. And with our experience of working in Washington, D.C. and Brussels at SHAPE headquarters, we know the Americans love us as their allies. And as I pointed out to them, not only has America tried to obtain all the natural resources of Venezuela, but they're trying to get all the natural resources of Guyana, which is the neighboring country, who it should be acknowledged, as we broadcast in the shows last year, has been subject to massive territorial claims themselves by the previous government of Venezuela, right? Then what makes people think that, unlike in the blossoming romance between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, where Ronald Reagan offered Margaret Thatcher an entire US Navy carrier task force, not just an aircraft carrier, but the aircraft carrier and all of the ships that are associated with an aircraft carrier, in order to directly engage in hostilities with the Argentinians and reclaim the Malvinas, or otherwise known as the Falkland Islands. Does any of our idiot armchair generals from the British Armed Forces think that Trump wouldn't hand over the Falkland Islands in a heartbeat if Milei would give him the oil rights, bearing in mind that it's believed that there are billions of barrels of oil in the exclusive economic zone around the Falkland Islands, which as yet have not been exploited because of the dispute over the sovereignty on the islands. If Milei were to say, we want the fishing rights and we want the control of the sovereignty, but everything below the surface, go for your life and drill away, Trump would flip on the United Kingdom in a red hot minute. And we would be left with our balls in our hands, because the Royal Navy is a quarter of the size that it was in 1982. Okay? We don't have the ability to project force. And even if we wanted to go nuclear, as the last two tests showed of the Trident missile system off the coast of America, it doesn't work, even if the Americans give you the launch permission, which the system is subject to, much like takeoff for F-35s for everyone apart from Israel. And that's assuming that the plane will take off, given that they're only serviceable about a third of the time. So, I mean, the shifts that are occurring are truly, truly momentous. And whilst it was tempting, very tempting, to use the Imperial March from one of the Star Wars movie beginnings with the script about the Empire taking action against the rebels, particularly in Star Wars #2, The Empire Strikes Back, I specifically didn't do that because in the version that we played, not only does the own composer of the music say that it's the best, but you see the European elite cheering it on like the obedient vassals that they are. For the people who are seriously committed to this program and hopefully will choose to buy a t-shirt to support us during the month of January, I really need to thank you for appreciating, as private communicators with me often, the amount of brain power that goes into these music selections, because there's multiple hidden meanings. many connections to this. And so whereas Glenn Deason, good luck to him, and he's a very impressive professor of the University of Southern Norway, is gratefully receiving 1 million views, we're getting a couple of hundred, but we're asking better questions, reaching more far-reaching conclusions, and tying it all in with some very interesting music choices. So on that note, I think now, given that we've gone well past the half-hour mark after our deep state interference, now would be a great time to play our interim music selection, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Hegemony, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep. Here's Hegemony. Quick 2-minute music interlude. We'll be back with more news for you. All right, we're back, Simon.
There. So I hope people will appreciate that I've actually chosen songs where you can see the lyrics. So even if they're a bit kind of heavy metal / thrash metal, there are actually some really poignant lyrics there, along with the symbology of the all-seeing eye and some of the other images that flashed across your screens. Hopefully, what was the T-shirt that you chose for this week, Sam? Did you choose the demons attacking, or did you choose the Hall of Serpents from Dante's Divine Comedies?
This one, I think, Gustav Dor. I'm liking this one. The all the demons here circling.
So that's the 5 demons attacking Dante.
No, like the circle. What's it called?
Oh no! We had that one. We had that one a couple of weeks ago. I thought you were going to choose the Hall of Serpents, which very much represents Congress, or the 5 demons attacking Dante. And if you can find either of those, then you can show our audience those and actually show them the incredible resolution of these images, which, bear in mind, were hand carved into wooden blocks about 150 years ago in one single day by Gustav Doré. There we go. That's a great version there. If you can possibly zoom in on that so our audience can see these. These t-shirts are about $30, and they'll help Sam meet the financial call to have our Twitter and Restream subscriptions for an additional year. It would really, really benefit the show greatly if people would consider buying any one of those 9 carefully selected t-shirts which correspond to the 9 appearances which I've agreed to do during the month of December and the 5 Mondays starting today in January. But where do you want to go next, Sam? What story do you want to focus on next?
I'm going to ask you, Simon, who's next? Who's next? Cuba.
Well, it's very interesting.
Cuba, Colombia, Iran. Who's next? Greenland, Canada. We're threatening everybody.
And Mexico.
And Mexico too. Is Mexico next?
Yeah. So let's quickly run through them. So there are a lot of drugs coming from Colombia. They have experienced a civil war. They do have a basing agreement, though they're called co-located strategic operation centers, or some ludicrous acronym to avoid using the phrase US military base in order to respect the sovereignty of Colombia. But there are, in fact, 8 of them, in much the same way that Okinawa is not actually a US military base. Ha ha ha. So Trump has already cut off the annual fees for those facilities, which obviously were being used not only for drug interdiction, but also to put massive pressure on the Bolivar Republic of Venezuela, which I flat out state right from the beginning, I've been criticizing in particular since they claimed 2/3 of the neighboring nation of Guyana, formerly British Guyana, that has a great deal of offshore oil as well. And after that, the president of Mexico has put out a very strong personal condemnation of the US military intervention in Venezuela today. There's obviously all of the fentanyl being brewed up in Mexico using Chinese precursors being directly smuggled into the United States. They were already being considered for military and direct military intervention against the drug cartels, which he had refused to give permission for due to a fear of civilian casualties as a result of US bombing. Because as we've seen in Israel, their entire policy on civilian harm mitigation and responses is not followed in any regard whatsoever, despite the twice repeated and not denounced policy of the US Department, previously of Defense and now of War, that we did most of a whole show about in terms of the aardvarks and our prostate cancer suffering previous Defense Department secretary. It's interesting now that a Secretary of War Hegseth has reposted an image put out by the Trump media response war room of a modernized version of an image from 1905 during the Teddy Roosevelt presidency of Trump striding from Alaska to southern South America, straddling the Western Hemisphere, in this case with a red tie, the tip of which pointing to the nation of Venezuela, and a baseball bat that actually has printed on it not the Monroe Doctrine, but the new nickname for the Trump corollary to the Teddy Roosevelt version of the Monroe Doctrine, which is the Don Roe Doctrine. It is absolute blatant gangsterism, and it is getting a fair degree of pushback. But as we saw today in the United Nations Security Council, and I believe you have the Jeffrey Sachs speech to that august body, that you kindly have lined up, and we'll play that in its entirety, maybe after the next break or before, if you would prefer. But there were nations who were invited to speak, such as Paraguay and Argentina, both of which have pro-Zionist, pro-Taiwan, recent right-wing governments elected, and they are very, very firmly standing with the United States in their actions against Venezuela. Panama took largely middle ground, though they pointed out that they hadn't recognized the re-election of Maduro in, I believe it was 2024. Chile joined in a letter of protest with about 6 other South and Central American nations, but also acknowledged that they hadn't officially recognized the re-election of Maduro. And it should be pointed out that the only member of the European Union, even including Denmark, which is being directly threatened repeatedly by the Trump administration and the wife of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Mrs. Katie Miller, Spain were the only one of those 27 nations who actually jointly signed that letter by members of CARICOM in condemning the US intervention. So, as I explained on the George Galloway show yesterday, we are actually seeing CARICOM pretty much split down the middle. It's a total of about 30 nations roughly, and it's very largely split. Trinidad and Tobago, who are the small island nation directly off the coast of Venezuela, are also supporting the imperialist attacks on the Bolivar Republic. And so there really isn't any degree of unity against the US administration. Now, what was also interesting about the Security Council meeting today, which was on a short notice basis, one, it's being presided over literally by the revolving president, in this case, the newly elected temporary Security Council member nation of Somalia, whose ambassador is allegedly implicated in some of these dodgy daycare centers, in this case, not in Minnesota, but actually in Ohio, to which he has so far given no public response. It will be interesting to see whether or not Somalia, or the remaining part of it after Somaliland has broken away, actually provides political asylum to the current governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, who, thankfully, not having been elected vice president of the United States, has now backtracked on his declaration from just 3 and a bit months ago for rerunning for a 3rd term as governor of that failed state, to instead disappear, hopefully, into obscurity. But I suspect he will actually be on the first non-direct flight to Somalia in order to enjoy some of his ill-gotten gains. And rest assured, when the media do go to check out upon his residence there will be a sign outside, but nobody in residence. But it was interesting to see the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations say something that was exactly what I had said was China's reaction to the American action that had prevented them from signing hundreds of bilateral agreements yesterday and today by their intervention on the 3rd of January from the United States. And I said to Mr. Galloway that China was profoundly shocked by the course of events. And the first sentence, as if I were his speechwriter, which I'm not, the Chinese ambassador said China is shocked at the American intervention into the internal affairs of the nation of Venezuela. Literally exactly what I said. And then it was interesting to see President Xi in his meeting with the new president of South Korea, that you'll get into more on the show. And I was the first person in the world to retweet the official transcript provided by the Foreign Ministry of the People's Republic of China, the first, despite my minute following. And in that sense, President Xi talked about the chaotic state and the increasing chaotic state of international affairs, as you'll later read out. And that indeed was one of the words, coincidentally, that was used by the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, that said that the American actions were forceful, the same word that John Williams just used. Lo and behold, there are no coincidences, and chaotic and unlawful in their intervention in Venezuela. And who knows, but one might suspect that that has something to do with the diplomatic nature between the governments of China and Russia, which is described as a comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination. Now, China has upgraded hours before the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela the diplomatic status and relationship between China and Venezuela to the second highest level possible out of 16 different categories that we have discussed in detail on a previous broadcast for Weaponized News. Only one step below that unique status between China and Russia, which is the all-weather partnership that only otherwise exists between Belarus and China, which bear in mind is part of the union state with Russia, and between Pakistan and China, which has this massive economic agreement called the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, of which they are now on version 2.0. So the status that has been given to the Venezuelan government, which, bear in mind, has gone through their constitutional process and put forward the vice president as the interim president in much the same way as would be done in the United States. Also, interestingly, re-electing her brother as the speaker. In their case, he's called the president, but it's the equivalent of Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States. Mr. Rodriguez is the now reaffirmed Speaker of the equivalent of the Venezuelan Parliament, which obviously puts him back into the order of succession, so that even if the former Venezuelan vice president gets taken out, as has been directly threatened repeatedly in the last 24 hours, personally by President Trump against her health, should she fail to cooperate with the US occupation, then her brother would actually follow in her footsteps. And we've seen the defense minister put out a very, very strong call for all the collectivos and the paramilitary groups, all of whom have been armed, of which there are about 8 million, to stand ready to resist a further US intervention, which Trump thought wouldn't be necessary, but is already prepared for a second strike on the nation of Venezuela, should they actually decide to exhibit any examples of sovereignty and fail to be a good vassal state like all of the rest of the European Union. It's extraordinary that President Macron, who starting in 2017 was talking about strategic autonomy, is still not pushing back against the actions of the United States. And apparently there's been a informal joint decision of the member states of the European Union, with the exception of Spain, that they need to continue licking the boots of Donald Trump in order that he totally don't drop them on their own in the shit supporting Zelensky with no American support whatsoever, not even intelligence or surveillance. So it just goes to show that they've dug themselves into such a hole backing the grifting, corrupt ex-president of Ukraine, who whose term of office expired in May, that they're still willing to keep on backing him, even though they don't recognize the re-election of President Maduro. It is literally turning the rules-based international order completely and totally on its head. And so when we talk about witnessing changes unseen in a century, these really, really are events of which there's no parallel since 1945. Truly, truly, truly momentous events, some of which the globalist think tanks like the Atlantic Council and the Royal United Service Institute and many others are now beginning to appreciate with increasingly shrill shrieks of alarm. But, you know, their funder, either directly or indirectly via the military industrial complex, who pays most of their salaries and pensions, is driving this change. And now the issue is whether or not America is retreating, doing a bit of a scorched earth approach and consolidating all of the resources of the Western Hemisphere, as has been suggested by some reviewers of the recent national security strategy. But as Brian Berlisic of the, New Atlas, I think, in Thailand, has pointed out in his restricted manner, given he's totally unable to put any negative comment out about whatsoever regarding Thailand, where he currently resides, much like the folks who broadcast from Qatar and the United Emirates, who are severely restricted in the comments that they make about those individual locations. Have we seen any announcements about bases being closed in Japan or Korea or Italy or any other nation that one may came to name across the world? No, we haven't. Indeed, they're building more in Romania. They're getting ready to build them in Moldova. They're still in all kinds of new locations in Poland. We've got forces in the Baltic states. We've got forces now in Sweden and in Finland. And so there's really, really very little immediate indication that we are actually seeing a retreat of the Western forces to the Western Hemisphere. And indeed, it was interesting that Colonel McGregor, who was on the Daniel Davis show yesterday, also made that point, that we're not seeing Trump even consolidate forces and give troops a rest or call up the reserves in order to prepare for really severe armed confrontation with either Russia or with the People's Republic of China. I've seen Chinese commentators today making the point that they are very happy about what's happening in Venezuela, despite the fact that China has over $50 billion invested there in the last 10 years with the Belt and Road Initiative. That they would love to see America go full bore into Venezuela and end up in an Afghanistan-style quagmire for the next decade, which would exhaust the troops and expend the munitions of the American military industrial complex. No doubt it would still make the share prices of Boeing and Lockheed and other such firms go up and up and up. But this is just the usual business, isn't it? That we see the war industry owners profiteering from global conflict, and it's the individual civilians who end up suffering the consequences. But at this point, Sam, could we please play our second interim musical interlude that we have, which is a bit of a tribute to the computer game Warhammer, and this one, which is just under 3 minutes long, but is not the end of the show. So please do come back afterwards when we'll be giving an extra 20 or 30 minutes of coverage before our closeout song. This one is called Embrace the Chaos. And once again, it does have lyrics, and I hope you'll find those particularly meaningful.
Embrace the chaos, virtues free. Feel euphoria start to invade.
Flesh dissolves, fertile mending, feel buzzing hymns in every pore. Release the dredge of old endings, embrace the rot, bloom once more. Fear gives way to swollen mirth, loyal spores reclaim the earth. Rotting garden, sweet release, life and death, unending peace. Embrace the chaos, life renewed. Find your solace in the ooze.
1,000 eyes map endless routes. Reality is folklore. Shatter limits illusion. Embrace the change your soul longs for. Trade your fear for revelations. Plans within grand machinations. Shape the galaxy with your thoughts. Be the master that others sought. Embrace the chaos. Schemes arise. Shift your form and seize the skies.
The Imperium fears what it cannot feel. Turns love into duty and bliss into zeal. You must free yourself from dogmas. Drown out their hymns. True freedom begins where your inhibitions end. Run for freedom, a mind unbound. Velvet hunger, your senses drown. Rod as armor, your fetid crown. Fates ascend as your world's unwound. Fury excess, plague design. Every road beyond the line. Fourfold paths converge as one. Eight-spoked wheel, we've just begun. They chain you down and demand belief. He promised salvation and gave you grief. Kneel no more before his lie. Embrace the chaos or choose to die. Embrace the chaos. Or choose to die.
Go and time and we're back.
Okay, Sam. Well, I think now would be a good time, if you wouldn't mind, to play the clip from Jeffrey Sachs addressing the United Nations Security Council today. And I would hazard a guess, since he does seem to travel overseas every week, that he's likely to have his US passport cancelled at any moment, because as our audience will be able to see from the visual impact upon the US ambassador to the United Nations, Professor Sachs' presentation did not go over well with the American government. So I'm pretty sure that he's going to get cavity searched when he goes through an American airport. And it's likely that all of his electronic devices will be seized. And I suspect that his passport will in fact be cancelled. So now might be a very, very good time for him to apply for asylum. He seems to get on well in China and also in the UAE. So hopefully he'll find a pleasant tax haven to set up shop in. But I wouldn't suggest that he go through JFK anytime soon.
And I'm hearing rumors on the internet he's part of Trendeagra gang. They're out of Venezuela.
Yeah, so it is possible that they'll find a kilo of fentanyl in his checked baggage when he does happen to go through customs by sheer coincidence.
There's Jeffrey Sachs at UN Security Council today.
Jeffrey Sachs.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, the issue before the Council today is not the character of the government of Venezuela. The issue is whether any member state, by force, coercion, or economic strangulation, has the right to determine Venezuela's political future or to exercise control over its affairs. This question goes directly to Article 2, Section 4 of the United Nations Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. The Council must decide whether that prohibition is to be upheld or abandoned. Abandoning it would carry consequences of the gravest kind. Let me offer some background. Since 1947, the United States foreign policy has repeatedly employed force, covert action, and political manipulation to bring about regime change in other countries. This is a matter of carefully documented historical record. In her book, Covert Regime Change, political scientist Lindsay O'Rourke documents 70 attempted U.S. regime change operations between 1947 and 1989 alone. These practices did not end with the Cold War. Since 1989, major United States regime change operations undertaken without authorization by the Security Council have included, among the most consequential, Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Syria beginning in 2011, Honduras 2009, Ukraine 2014, and Venezuela from 2002 onward. The methods employed are well established and well documented. They include open warfare, covert intelligence operations, instigation of unrest, support for armed groups, manipulation of mass and social media, bribery of military and civilian officials, targeted assassinations, false flag operations, and economic warfare. These measures are illegal under the UN Charter, and they typically result in ongoing violence, lethal conflict, political instability, and deep suffering of the civilian population. The recent U.S. record with respect to Venezuela is also clear. In April 2002, the U.S. knew of and approved an attempted coup against the government. In the 2010s, the United States funded civil society groups actively engaged in anti-government protests. When the government cracked down on the protests, the U.S. followed with a series of sanctions. In 2015, President Barack Obama declared Venezuela to be, and I quote, an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. In 2017, at a dinner with Latin American leaders on the margin of the UN General Assembly, President Trump openly discussed the option of the U.S. invading Venezuela to overthrow the government. During 2017 to 2020, the United States imposed sweeping sanctions on the state oil company PDVSA. Oil production fell by 75% from 2016 to 2020, and the real GDP per capita declined by 62%. The UN General Assembly has repeatedly voted overwhelmingly against such unilateral coercive measures. Under international law, only the Security Council has the authority to impose such measures. On the 23rd of January 2019, the United States unilaterally recognized Mr. Juan Guaido as interim president, and a few days later froze approximately $7 billion of Venezuelan sovereign assets held abroad and gave the designated authority over certain of these assets. These actions form part of a continuous U.S. regime change effort spanning more than 2 decades. In the past year, the United States has carried out bombing operations in 7 countries, none of which were authorized by the UN Security Council, and none of which were undertaken in lawful self-defense under the Charter. The targeted countries include Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and now Venezuela. In the past month, President Trump has issued direct threats against 6 UN member states, including Colombia, Denmark, Iran, Mexico, Nigeria, and of course, Venezuela. Members of the Council are not called upon to judge Nicolas Maduro. They are not called upon to assess whether the recent U.S. attack and ongoing naval quarantine results in freedom or in subjugation. Members of the Council are called upon to defend international law, and specifically the UN Charter. The realist school of international relations, articulated most brilliantly by John Mearsheimer, accurately describes the condition of international anarchy as the tragedy of great power politics. Realism is therefore a description, not a solution for peace. Its own conclusion is that anarchy leads to tragedy. In the aftermath of World War I, the League of Nations was created to end the tragedy through the application of international law. Yet the world's leading nations failed to defend international law in the 1930s, leading to renewed global war. The United Nations emerged from that catastrophe as humanity's second great effort to place international law above international anarchy. In the words of the Charter, the UN was created, quote, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind. Given that we are in the nuclear age, failure cannot be repeated. Humanity would perish. There would be no third chance. To fulfill its responsibilities under the Charter, the Security Council should immediately affirm the following actions. The United States shall immediately cease and desist from all explicit and implicit threats or use of force against Venezuela. The United States shall terminate its naval quarantine and all related coercive military measures undertaken in the absence of authorization by the UN Security Council. The United States shall immediately withdraw its military forces from within and along the perimeter of Venezuela, including intelligence, naval, air, and other forward deployed assets positioned for coercive purposes. Venezuela shall adhere to the UN Charter and to the human rights protected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Secretary General, I recommend, should immediately appoint a special envoy mandated to engage relevant Venezuelan and international stakeholders and to report back to the Security Council within 14 days with recommendations consistent with the Charter, and the Security Council should remain urgently seized of this matter. All member states should refrain from unilateral threats, coercive measures, or armed actions undertaken outside the authority of the UN Security Council. In closing, Mr. President and distinguished members of the Council, peace and the survival of humanity depend on whether the United Nations Charter remains a living instrument of international law or is allowed to wither into irrelevance. That is the choice before this Council today. Thank you very much.
All right, Simon, so has the UN failed, I guess is the question. It sure looks that way.
Well, he proposed actions that they should take, but none of those were even up for discussion during the course
the
of
United States doesn't honor international law, i.e. Netanyahu, i.e. all this military imperialism all around the world. That was just all mentioned there. So it's really...
And Lindsey Graham specifically said today that the ICC is irrelevant for the United States. So it's literally rules for thee, but not for me. And he explicitly stated that on a television interview today. Now, we have to look at how the rest of the world is seeing this, in particular, the global south, and whether or not there will even be a rallying call for them to get together, because it's only through a massive alliance of nations that they'll be able to withstand the financial and military might of the United States. And that may indeed never come to pass, certainly in so far as Europe is concerned. But it was very interesting today that we had what I believe was day 2 of the visit from the new president of the Republic of South Korea to the People's Republic of China. It seems to have been a very, very happy meeting indeed. And if you have it available, you can either roll it on the screen and I'll read it, or if you would care to read it, we can see one of the major statements from the joint declaration that was published by those two presidents earlier today.
Yeah, I got it here. I'll read it. Simon. Here's an excerpt from President of China Xi Jinping from the South Korean China Summit. See what they had to say here. Xi Jinping pointed out that the current world's century-old changes are accelerating and the international situation has become more chaotic. China and South Korea bear important responsibilities in maintaining regional peace and promoting global development. They have a wide range of interests. They should firmly stand on the right side of history and make correct strategic choices. More than 80 years ago, China and South Korea made great national sacrifices to win the victory against Japanese militarism. Today, we should work together to defend the achievements of the victory in World War II and safeguard peace and stability in Northeast Asia as the beneficiaries of economic globalization. China and South Korea should jointly oppose protectionism, practice true multilateralism, and contribute to the promotion of an equal and orderly multipolar inclusive economic globalization. China does love their globalization now, don't they?
Yeah, and then the Korean Prime Minister in the joint statement later on replied that Korea respected the core interests of China and reaffirmed Korea's 30-year standing position on there being one China, i.e. that China includes Taiwan. Now, it should be noted that the Japanese Empire seized Taiwan in 1895 and also occupied the entire Korean peninsula for over 50 years. And that is what President Xi Jinping was referring to in terms of the long struggle for the Korean nation for its sovereignty and independence there. And they actually visited a joint monument for like a Korean government in exile. So what he's asking there is for Korea quite unequivocally and unabashedly to side with China against Japan exactly as it did during World War II and in the run up to World War II, and not be part of the US containment alliance of the Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan against China. Very, very bold statement indeed. And this should also be seen in the light of the fact that the Korean president is shortly due to go and visit the Japanese prime minister. So the position that he's taken with China is not going to go over well at all in the vassal state of Japan, which, with their new very, very right wing prime minister, has really been saber rattling against the Chinese, much to their fury. And they've been condemning both their excesses during World War II and their long history of militarism. And so tensions between China and Japan are quite elevated at the moment. And because of the situation both with Venezuela and Ukraine, not really receiving nearly the attention that it should be getting. So there's a lot going on around the world, not just in Venezuela. And one should note that Australia is relying upon the Republic of Korea for their entire 10-ship modernized frigate program, and America is relying upon Korea with a technology transfer to build its new fleet of icebreakers, of which they currently have one, versus Russia's, I think, somewhere around 50 operational, many of which are nuclear powered. And this is as China is talking about expanding its activities both into the Arctic and the Antarctic. So even if Korea goes slow on some of those contracts, it will have a massive, massive impact upon the American industrial defense complex that Trump is trying to reinvigorate. And it was interesting that the American shipbuilding company HII had their CEO issue a long statement today, which I retweeted on X, where he was talking about the 40 current shipbuilding contracts that they have underway for both surface vessels and submarines. But it should be noted that the current build rate of US Navy submarines is running at 1 a year as opposed to the contracted 2 a year. So they're being greatly, greatly outpaced by China, which is why they're having to outsource shipbuilding to Korea, and they were considering also giving contracts to shipyards in India, but Trump's threatening to sanction them just in the last 24 hours. So why would you help the US Navy refurbish and expand when they're talking about jacking up sanctions and cancelling H-1B visas? So they're literally trying to dominate the entire world and extract resources and services, but telling you to F off in the very next press release.
Simon, we're in the
So
golden age. It's the golden
yeah,
age.
it's the golden shower age. That may well indeed be taking place. And I should point out that I did 3 hours of my day watching the UN Security Council because my Russian provided chesty red-headed mistress failed to turn up. Is because I am actually so dedicated to our international audience that I voluntarily chose to do that. Though I am willing to consider approaches from other foreign organisations should they wish to distract me in a meaningful manner. But having said that,
Simon, quickly, we got a couple more stories. I mentioned earlier, yeah, this poor, who knows if it was organic or whatever, a patsy, but this kid, I guess he's not even a kid, like 26-year-old, went and broke out the windows with a hammer of Vice President J.D. Vance's home in Cincinnati, Ohio.
one has to ask, how the heck did he manage to get past perimeter security to actually run along the outside of the building, smashing the windows? One, how are those windows not impact resistant? You can buy them off the shelf in Florida for the hurricane building code. And what if JD Vance had been in residence and he'd thrown in some kind of nerve agent or something? So that looks like yet another massive, massive, as Emerald Robertson has described it, Secret Service security fiasco. And just as well, he wasn't there. It's interesting that he wasn't at the joint presentation with Trump and Ratcliffe and Rubio and Hegseth on the day of the Venezuelan attack, because they've now decided that the security situation is such that, much like Cheney and Bush after 9/11, they're now being kept in separate locations as much as possible in order to preserve the continuity of government. So, they seem to think that there are some, strategic risks involved. And, Putin's not happy with how things are going. We're seeing a lot of governmental changes in Ukraine. Defense minister, head of the intelligence services, all kinds of positions. Budanov being made the presidential chief of staff, like Susan Riles in the United States. And
Simon,
and
many
so
are saying they did not see this move coming from Zelensky appointing Cynthia Freeland out of Canada as economic advisor to Ukraine.
yeah, so she's getting her grandfather's old title of SS Gruppenführer. So she doesn't even need a new uniform. She's just having his one tailored, and so that's very good for the environment that they're not having to make up a new uniform for her. I'm not sure if she'll get to wear the same medals or not. But in all seriously, that is quite extraordinary that the former Canadian finance and deputy prime minister is now going to be the chief economic advisor on reconstruction and development to the president of Ukraine, the alleged president having actually never ever stood for re-election. So just goes to show where her loyalties lie. And it's worth remembering that her first professional job off her knees was actually as a journalist in Ukraine some 25 years ago or so. And older Justin Trudeau has reaped his millions from investment in various mRNA precursor production companies in Canada and is now living the A-list celebrity high life with Katy Perry. So both of those evil globalists, young global leaders from the World Economic Forum, have moved on to greater things in the world, insofar as they are allowing it to remain. So,
Simon, let me get to two more reports here. Domestically, thankfully, the tyranny of the Department of Homeland Security is growing. Here's the Department of Homeland Security meme of the day. They say 120% ICE manpower increase. There's now 22,000 strong and growing at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
And sending 2,000 of those 22,000 to Minnesota today.
Yes, indeed, to go after the Somalis. We're going to get them over there, bombing the hell out of Somalia, and get them over here, apparently. Public health news quickly here. Under President Trump's, let's see, what they do at the CDC is finally adopting common sense updates to America's childhood immunization
Vaccination schedule. They've cut it from 11 jabs to 11 types of jabs. Sorry, from 17 to 11. So it's a 1/3 reduction. That, because some of those are 2 or 3 doses, is a significant reduction in the number of individual injections. Many people were saying that, one, it wasn't enough. Other states were saying, F you, we're going to continue on the old schedule. But Kennedy came out publicly and said, remember, if you're not following the CDC recommendations, then you don't have protection under the Vaccine Act of 1986. So doctors can be sued for making recommendations other than the CDC schedule. So the worm is turned in that regard. Still no banning of the mRNA death jabs, unfortunately. And it's interesting that Malone, who's super deep state connected both through his father and father-in-law, talking of chesty redheads, he has said that unfortunately he has little to zero influence over the current head of the FDA. And so for the time being, those deathly jabs are remaining available to the general public, not just the few white, incredibly woke liberal women who seem very keen to kill or mutilate their own children.
Anything for public health, Simon? There in the comments. Excuse me if I misspoke. Lies on the Rumble said it's Christina, not Cynthia Freeland there.
Christina
Excuse me if we misspoke. Yeah. And then
Christina Freeland, normally spelled with a jagged double S.
And some good news. We finally got some good news out of all this. Maybe it's good news if you love U.S. Imperialism. So maybe all this is good news for you, but some good news for Joe Blows on the ground that don't like, eating all that pesticide, because Maha did something good. How this is even a thing, I don't know, but I guess we know from all the corruption, it don't take much thinking. Anyhow, there was part of this big Senate and House spending bill that's due to be passed through the Congress in the next couple weeks or month, however long it may take to wind through there. We may see another government shutdown, by the way, in this new year. But thankfully, Section 453, which was proposed to grant pesticide companies indemnity, essentially making them liability free for any damages to public health and the individual caused by their pesticides, that was in this bill. And thankfully, that's been stripped out in both versions of the federal spending bill. And so that's good news. They will still have to face up to all the damages from their pesticides and can be sued, unlike the miracle jab manufacturers, as we know from the 1986 Act there, Simon. So some good news on that front for people being injured by the mass amount of pesticides. And here in Fresno County, where I'm at, it's been reported over the last month that we are the ground zero in California for these forever chemicals. And so it feels like there's going to be some growing backlash as we learn more about the damaging effects of, quote, forever chemicals in our environment sprayed all over our crops here in the Central Valley, Fresno County, where we're broadcasting from. So anyway, some good news that maybe people have some remedy if they're damaged by these toxic pesticides. Simon.
Sure. So I think we should kind of transition in a non-genital mutilating way into our wrap up. So I would just once again like to reiterate my Happy New Year greetings to our audience. I would invite them, please, most sincerely, heartfelt request, to retweet the special that you have put out as a standalone episode based upon our show a week ago, which is the 80-minute exploration of the relevant section of the national security strategy and the long foreign policy document in relation to Latin American and Caribbean countries that I was the first to go over in detail from the Chinese government, issued on the 10th of December. And also, please, would people consider purchasing any one of the excellent T-shirts that we have available for their purchase, approximately $30, depending upon the size, of which we receive about $8, which is directly going into resubscribing to Restream and also your premium feature on X, which is what allowed us to do that long quote from the joint statement from the Chinese and Korean government. So we are actually really, really using this stuff, despite the deep state's best efforts to censor me extremely heavily indeed. I'm really trying to think of other ways to overcome this. I'm particularly vulnerable being in Europe or the United Kingdom, because they're able to directly interdict with service providers on a very immediate basis here. There is very, very little remaining freedom of speech, unfortunately. So on that cheerful note, as a salute to any of our recovering MAGA listeners, the song that I've chosen, much to my surprise, never thought this would occur on any of my broadcasts, is actually from Madonna. It's from the album American Life. The title is Intervention. And interestingly enough, she did a world tour called the Reinvention World Tour, which some would suggest is exactly what the US Department of War is currently doing. They're doing a worldwide tour to reinvent US foreign policy. And so, once again, this is a version with the lyrics. Pay particular attention halfway through where she mentions how things can change in the blink of an eye. And with that, I am grateful for our audience's perseverance, despite the connectivity issues that we had at the beginning of the show. And I hope they get to enjoy this closeout song. And don't forget, all the tough guys out there, if you do actually feel somewhat heartbroken about the aspects of your white civilization that you've lost in the last 50 years, now is an appropriate time to burst into tears without being judged harshly. So on that, I hope that I'm still alive to be able to address our gathered audience in 7 days' time.
Thank you very much, Simon, for all of your hard work and input to Weaponized News. We truly do appreciate it on this special Monday edition of Weaponized News. Apologies for the connection issues at the beginning, but after about the 20-25 minute mark, everything went smooth. So with that, as always, everybody do your own research, peace, love, and freedom. Speak out and take action. Have a great rest of your Monday evening. We'll be back here at the regular time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern tomorrow for more Weaponized News. And again, here is Madonna, Intervention. Give us a follow, like, share, subscribe, push that notification button. Give Simon a follow at Simon from Flory 2. You can see it right there at the bottom of your screen. Give me a follow at Weaponized News. And we'll see everybody tomorrow if they don't blow up the whole world first. Here is Madonna, Intervention.
Baby, because he makes me cry. I got to make him happy. I got to teach him how to fly. I want to take him higher, way up like a bird in the sky. I got to calm him down now. I want to save his life. And I know that love will change us forever. And I know that love will keep us together. And I know there is nothing to fear. And I know that love will take us away from here. Sometimes it's such a pleasure. Sometimes I wanna tear it all down. It's easy to be lazy and hard to go away from the crowd. I know the road looks lonely, but that's just Satan's game. And either way, my baby will never be the same. And I know that love will change us forever. And I know that love will keep us together. And I know there is nothing to fear. And I know that love will take us away from here. In the blink